And good evening, Council President Hensley and members of the council and guests. We're going to be talking about the previously discussed undergrounding of utilities project on Ivy Street. We have a draft IGA with Canby Utility. We want to walk through that a bit and then just kind of talk about some of the issues related to that project. Mr. Dan Murphy, Cub General Manager, has generously joined us this evening and is on the Zoom meeting with us here. So thank you, Dan, for being here and being able to help answer questions. Joe Lindsay is going to help with this conversation as well. So we just wanted to bring back to you, Council, as per your prior direction, the IGA that's in your packet is a draft IGA that we've been working on between the city of Canby and Cub. I would note the version of the draft IGA that is in your packets, since the time that we printed the packets and published them, we've received a little additional feedback from Mr. Murphy on some, from his, I believe from his board attorney, that they've requested a few minor, I guess what I would call just legal changes, nothing substantive to what you're looking at in terms of any of the major terms or conditions of that agreement. And Joe can help speak to that if we need to. But essentially, we just wanted to walk through the high points of the IGA, kind of where we've landed, revisit any issues or concerns or further direction from you, Council. And again, I think what we also want to do is make sure that it's clear what the project would be. So we'll get into some of that in terms of what, you know, with the individual properties along the street where the undergrounding would occur. There are some issues with regard to how we would go about having to gain access to properties and determine whether each property owner would want to underground their individual utilities or not, and what that entails. So with that, I think if you don't mind, Joe, maybe if you would just kind of hit the high points of the IGA, and then we'll kind of go from there. And then maybe Dan, if you'd be so willing to help us sort of describe what the undergrounding looks like, and then what that, kind of undergrounding to each property might look like, and what some of those issues we'd be dealing with there would look like.
And what some of the iterations of that might be, if you don't mind, Mr. Murphy, just because it seems like different property owners could opt for a couple of different fashions of, pole / complete underground. We're just going from basically the spot of the main being undergrounded up to the house still. If you want to address some of those issues. And then I think there needs to be a discussion at some point about, or at least an understanding of if the county's intentions, as far as your understanding, Mr. Murphy, was that they were going to be potentially doing the condemnation process. So we might want to touch on that a little bit too. But primarily the obligations here are set out, tried to be pretty straightforward and say what we mean and mean what we say in this. So we're trying to be tricky or anything like that. Some of the types of slight tweaks that Cubs Council put in there were primarily, anytime it said acts by the other person, they decided, okay, well, let's have a word like acts or omissions. So it's just kind of adding a little bit more legalese, but not actually getting at the intent or the substance of it. And the real intent and substance of this is that the city, if we do this, is going to assume the responsibility of the project. And that means we'll have to go through the RFP process, and we'll have to contract out to get it undergrounded, and that we will be on the hook for the price of the entirety of it. And once we're done with completing the project, Cub is willing to give us the $310,000 that they say it would have cost them to do the project the way they wanted to do it. So with the appraisers that worked on it from the county, it was probably going to be, or estimator, it was going to be, I think 1.3 million was the estimation. And that was a conservative estimate in that they thought it was maybe a high end of possibility, so that the sticker shock would be out there and we'd get out in front of the sticker shock price. But so primarily what you're looking at is the city taking on the obligation of this and probably paying somewhere around $1 million, and that Cub will then reimburse the city $310,000. And the other highlights of this are basically it's still Cub's system, and so at the whole time, Cub's going to own these lines, so they're actually going to be our power lines at any point. We're not going to accept ownership of those. We're just going to be working on the project using probably a contractor and then sometimes our public works staff. And then they're going to help us design it so that it's consistent with their designs and consistent with what the professional standards should be from their end. But otherwise, you know, we're going to look forward to working together and then being reimbursed at the end for the cost that they were going to have to pay for just moving the poles over. Does that seem to cover?
Yeah, I think.
And do you have anything to add to?
Well, the other thing is Cub has also committed to providing at their own expense technical assistance throughout the project. So they would have, and it specifically says senior staff in the agreement, staff that would assist the city's engineering and design team and our project manager to essentially help advise and provide that technical assistance throughout the process and basically help make sure that the project is supervised appropriately.
Right, and understand that you know, we would walk with you through the process. We just want to be sure that we do everything we can, that if the city decides to opt for this at its pleasure, then you know, when we get done and the project is ready to be cut over, no surprises, that if there were any variances in how you can build that underground line, that we worked that out way prior to completion at the point that the county undoubtedly is going to be ready for it to be done and everything. And so it's just good faith, you know, that we always operate with good faith, especially with the city. And so, yeah, we'll, at our expense, provide our operations manager and field supervisor to be highly responsive to you like we always are in how we do business and you know, step in, answer any questions you have as you go through. You know, our assistance, our technical assistance is not to be confused with engineering. You know, you have your own engineering firm that can engineer it, and understand that with an underground electric line, there's a lot of different appurtenances that can be applied to your underground project, a lot of different ways that you can build an underground, any one of which will work. And so we're going to be there to let you know that the way that your engineer is designing it and wants to design it for you, that we're okay with that. And we need to be there for you and do that early on and not get to the end and then, you know, have delays. You don't want delays on the project because that causes cost overruns on both engineering and also with your contractor. So yeah, we're certainly here to help and we're going to help you.
So, yeah, thanks, Dan. So, council, that is really kind of just a very high level, but a pretty accurate snapshot of what the IGA looks like. There's just, as Joe said, it's pretty simple and straightforward, and it describes what it is. Before we move into the next part of this conversation with kind of explaining how this right-of-way will work and, you know, getting a little bit more into some of the technical aspects of this project, do you have any questions or comments about the agreement here before we move into kind of talking about what the project sort of looks like and feels like, if you will?
Well, Scott, I'll start off by, I wasn't a fan of the last conversation about this. Have we come any closer to identifying the funding source?
We have. Based on the last, so I realized it was the council's direction to staff was not was not unanimous, and we recognize that, but there was majority direction, and part of that direction was to go forth and identify funding sources, and we did that. We are confident that if council wants to continue to proceed with this and come back and ratify the final agreement in a regular council meeting in the probably near future, if this is going to proceed, the funding sources we could discuss a little bit further at that point in time, but we do have funds for this, and we're confident that we can pay for this if the council wants to proceed.
Okay. I'm still not confident. I'll just put that out there. But for the sake of continuing discussion, I see Councilor Banks. He has a question.
Thank you. If our costs are less than 1.3 million, are the savings going to be Cub's savings or the city of Canby's savings? Does the IGA specify that?
They're going to pay us when the project is done. They'll pay us $310 if it works. So when they switch over and the electricity actually flows through the ground, then at that point they're going to remove their stuff and pay us. So they'll always pay us the $310 under this contract.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's still Cub's equipment, correct?
It is. It's part of their system. It'll always stay their system.
Okay. Any other questions from council regarding this piece? Seeing none, go ahead, Scott, with the next piece.
Yeah, so I guess kind of both Dan and Joe, feel free to jump in here and help out, but we just wanted to, again, make sure it was clear to you, council, what we're talking about this project consists of. So when we say undergrounding, what we can ensure is that, you know, the parts of the electric utility that are in the public right-of-way are going to be put underground. The part of that that's a little bit has the potential for some variance, I guess I would say, is that each individual property owner, we have to have then an agreement with each of them. And I can't remember, what was the number of properties, Jerry, along there?
I think it's like 20.
Yeah, I think it was just under 30 or so properties individually along this, the project that we would be dealing with. And so what we would have to do is essentially negotiate an access agreement with each of those properties to identify with them that, you know, we would like to underground their utility, the electric utility, if they wish that to happen. The legal piece of this, Joe can probably describe in terms of, you know, what our options are if they don't want to do that. Now, our cost estimate, just so you know, is the price that we're talking about includes that, you know, the assumption is that if each of the property owners agrees, that price is included in our overall cost, so this 1.3 estimate. It is possible that some of the property owners may not wish to have their property disturbed. They may not want to provide access. And so what that might look like then is that we would have to explore what the legal options are. But if the property ultimately doesn't have an undergrounded utility, there could then be a smaller power pole that still exists, and Dan can describe that a little bit more technically than I can. But I don't know, first, if you want to talk about the legal piece of that, Joe.
Well, you guys, as a quick snapshot, we just went through a different process where we purchased right-of-way. And so that isn't the purchasing of land, it's just purchasing the ability to be under the ground, in this case, and then to have future access for maintenance purposes. So we would need public utility easements, and those have value. And so those would be sought. And the extent to which you seek them, if you get some pushback from landowners that don't want you to dig, say, a line clear through their property over to their house, then you have a couple of options. And one is to say, okay, well then we can put a mini pole, and Mr. Murphy can talk about this a lot more intelligently than I can, with the existing line that goes up usually to the kind of the roof that you see as you drive along. You can kind of see a lot of lines go up to the roof. Well, you can kind of have the line, even though the main is buried a little ways out, you can have another little pole and basically have the line then go back up and still attach to the corner of the house. Or if the person wants to go ahead and sell us the public utility easement, then we could then bury it clear to the house, and then there's a different type of connection at that point. So there's a cost there too. But the idea is you go along and you try to negotiate with folks. If they won't sell it all, then part of this project, we're going to be coming back and asking, and this is still a little up in the air, right? Whether or not you guys want to even give the county the right to perform condemnation if, as a last ditch effort with folks that don't want to give us easements or allow us on their property for the purposes of this project. So that's going to come to you either way, because the county, in order to put the light in at 13th, is going to be asking for a certain amount of power, just so that when they're negotiating, they know that they have that power in advance to say, these are some of the options. But this will also be whether or not you want to give that ability for the land to be taken eventually, if and paid the value of what we're taking. But if we're going to be allowed to actually take, so that we can bury everything to each house, or if we want to just give us at least the basic taking, maybe somewhere close to the actual current right of way. And that's kind of a bigger discussion too. So, and I'll let Dan supplement if he wants to.
Yeah, just want to make one comment. Let's all just keep in mind that the county's road project does not require any, securing of easements on private property, except the very frontage that they have to acquire in order to get the space for the new road and that sort of thing. If we were required, and we're not, the county has conveyed to us what they need. They need us to resituate the overhead line, and we're prepared to do that strictly at our expense. And, but if it were a requirement of Canby Utility to underground this line, and we knew we had to meet that obligation, we still would not impose anything on the individual homeowners, those businesses along there. It's not necessary, really. And both as a citizen of Canby and me and my role with Canby Utility is both, I would just encourage the city to consider maybe not doing that part of it, unless you have homeowners that want at this time to underground their service line, from our right of way out front where the line is to their meter base. If they want to do that, I would be very agreeable. This would be my approach now. I'd be very agreeable to that, and I would be willing to allow them to do that conversion at the same time as this other construction out along the road, the underground line, takes place. I would cooperate, and would allow them to do that and cooperate with them and let them do that at their expense to beautify their property. But I don't see where the project needs undergrounding all the way to every meter on private property. I would encourage you to consider. You can save a lot of money on the project by not pulling that private aspect into your public project. That's the best advice I bring to you tonight, I think. That's how we would approach it. We would not get on people's private property and impose undergrounding, all that expense all the way to their meter base. We wouldn't do that. So I think that's something worth considering.
And so Dan, just for the council's understanding, then if that was the approach that was decided, what would that look like? There would be a small service pole or something to that effect that would go up the property to serve the property owner's lines, right?
Right. Typically, you would go to the very edge of your right of way, and you would put a pole there and you would come up from the underground transformer, you'd come up there, it'd be way, way off from the sidewalk. It wouldn't detract in any way from the beauty of the new entry into Canby along the sidewalks. It would all still be completely underground until you get to their private property line. And right there, we would set the pole, we'd come up, and they'd continue to have their overhead service line to their meter base, without imposing on them any requirements to disturb their lawn. We have had to do a lot of reconductoring around the golf course of those underground, those first generation underground electric services. And, you'd think that expense would be the main concern that those homeowners have, but it's lots of time it's not the money. It's that they put all that effort into their yard and they just don't want to see a trench dug right through their yard. They're worried about their sprinkler systems and everything. And they would much rather you not do that. In our case, when we have underground conductor that's blown, we have no choice. We have to fix it. And when it's time to redo the whole thing because we know that it's beginning to fail, we just have to do it. And we anger some homeowners because of the intrusion that comes with that. And it takes them quite a long time to restore their yards and everything. And even though in that case, we're responsible for the damage and we do repair it, they're still not very happy. The memory fades, thankfully, but it's just not something that if you can avoid, it's not something that you typically want to do as part of a project. And so in this case, again, we would set a pole. It'd be well off of the sidewalk. And then we come up and then their service would be like it's always been for them. But again, we would extend the courtesy to allow them to integrate that underground all the way up to their house if they want to. That's just their choice.
How big is that pole?
I'm not sure exactly, what the height would have to be, but it would be a minimum height pole. The shortest pole we use under the assumption that there's not anything topographically on their property that requires us to start out with a taller pole. And I don't think along there that would be the case. It would just be a standard, what we call a riser pole.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Councilor Spoon.
Thank you, Council President Hensley. I guess this would be a request for staff then that when you come back for the final ratification and the funding source, could maybe we get some images of what these service poles look like? It just, the part of the reason we want to do this is for beautification, and it would be easier for me to move forward if I can wrap my head around what that looks like, because I'm not sure I can imagine it, not being in that industry. But if when you come back to us with the rest of the information, could we maybe get some images of what these service poles look like, their distance to the sidewalk and whatnot, so we can determine if the beautification is enough to move forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Parker, then Banks.
So if I'm following this right, if homeowners don't want to do something, we have a decision to make, but we don't know that they don't want to do something. So we're talking about making a decision on information we don't have yet. Is that correct?
That is a pretty, abstract summation, but I think pretty accurate.
Okay, so how about you all go out and talk to the property owners and see if we have a problem instead of us spending a lot of time tonight engineering a solution to a problem that may not be.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why we're having this conversation tonight. I think that's a fair point, Councilor Parker. We're coming back to you with some information that here's kind of where we're at, but do we want to proceed? Here's what's entailed. We didn't want to go out and spend that kind of staff time until we had at least checked in with you like we're doing right now. So fair point. If that's the sort of at least a majority kind of head nod wish, then we'll certainly look at bringing you back some information like that.
Well, I just think we can spend any number of hours talking about theoretical possibilities and problems on any number of public works projects. But we seem to have a go, no-go situation based upon information that we don't have. So I appreciate you letting us know that there are a lot of moving parts to this. But until we know that there's a problem, I'm not willing to spend energy trying to solve a problem I don't know exists yet.
Councilor Banks.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for Dan. First, what are the costs of running a pole, putting a new pole in, and then running the line over to the house versus the cost of running it underground to the house and hooking it up that way? How much more expensive is it to do the undergrounding in a connection to a house? And I understand that the distances are going to vary, but they probably shouldn't vary too much on Ivy.
Yeah, I'm really not prepared to give you numbers on that tonight, Councilor Banks. I can't tell you.
Okay, I think that the answer to that would be a factor in this discussion. And then when we talk about putting the pole to the edge of the property line, aren't the property lines right up to the sidewalk on Ivy?
It's the edge of the right-of-way.
New right-of-way.
Yeah, so even if you have a property owner that owns the underlying land, the right-of-way is an additional right in property to have something there and to have access to fix it if you need to. And so you're right in that the property line itself goes clear over to the road, but that the right-of-way itself only is like 10 or 15 feet into the property.
So then we would be looking at setting the pole up in the yard.
Yes.
It would probably be, I'm envisioning based on what I understood the county was going to procure, would be an additional 15 foot on each side of the existing highway. There'll be a 15-foot new public right-of-way, and your sidewalk was only going to take up a portion of that. And so we would just go as far in to the edge of that public right-of-way off of the sidewalk and set the pole there. And that would replace the huge poles that hold that main circuit that runs, underneath, literally above the sidewalk that you have to look at when you take your walk. And that would be off to the right or the left, depending on how it's situated. And it wouldn't be intrusive. I'm at a loss to understand the need, to affect all those homes in the project when the objective is to do the road widening and the beautification of the new sidewalks and all. That's something I've had a hard time understanding, but it's whatever the city wants is fine with me, because this is not beyond what we need and what our obligations are, and we just would like to help the city achieve its desires here. But
Okay, we've heard.
You think it's a $300,000 question, and Councilor Parker, I don't think that is going to be a key decision point. It's just, in my mind, it's more. $300,000 of a $1.3 million project. It's not a small amount of money. It's a nice chunk. It'd be good to save it if you could see that that's the wise thing to do. It'd be a nice little chunk of money to save, and you might also not disturb some customers who, much to our surprise, might not be as interested in undergrounding their service line to their meter as what we think they would be. Just something worth considering. I wouldn't think it'd be a big deciding point in your project, just this piece of it. But I tell you, sometime if you can avoid condemnations on private property, you're always way better off. If you can achieve your objectives without doing that. The county's going to handle the other part parallel to the road on private property to get the necessary space. And, homeowners all across the nation are used to that. They see that coming, and they're in the acceptance mode of that by the time it gets to them, because they understand roads in the fullness of time have to be widened, and they understand that. But when they say, we also want to tear up your road and put it underground all the way to your meter and maybe affect your roof where the masthead is, a lot of them don't like that. They like it just like it is.
So, Mr. Murphy, I do understand what you're saying there. and I'm going to ask a question that you're probably not going to be able to answer right now, but and I'm not sure I need to have a real answer, but didn't we have to rehang a bunch of power lines after that ice storm because trees knocked them down here in Canby? And like, how would that cost compare with the cost of undergrounding the lines so that the trees can no longer do that?
Councilor Bangs, our complete total cost of that ice storm for repairing our line damage was $65,000.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, Councilor Barwick, did you have any questions that haven't been answered for you in this discussion? I want to make sure everybody has a chance. Okay. Well, it sounds like councilors have some requests on information to come back to us with. I will be honest and say after this discussion, I'm less of a fan of the project than I was in the last meeting. So I would like to see that information come back to us and have a bigger amount of evidence that this is something that we should be doing in the next discussion. Any other councilor have any other questions, comments, concerns? Do you have anything more for us, Scott or Joe?
Just want to confirm what I'm hearing is we've heard some requests for some additional information. We will certainly go forth and explore that information and bring it back. I think what I was envisioning here was I'm thinking that this will probably be another work session, or at least a part of a work session. It may not be might not need a full hour or something like that, but and bring you back an update to some of the information you're asking. While you've been talking here in the last few minutes, Jerry Nelzine, who's actually here with us too this evening, pulled out some information from, I think, our cost estimators information and just handed it to me. So what we're looking at is we've got a total of, along the total of the project, we've got 23 home conversions that we're talking about, or properties. And the estimate was at $20,000 per house to do from the point of right of way through the private property. And that total looks like about $460,000. So if every property owner were willing and at the number of properties, the estimate, and as Joe said, maybe that's was conservative in that it might be a little bit of a high estimate, we're looking at about $460,000. So just got that information just now, but we'll also bring that back again with the updated report we'll give you.
And some visuals that you guys can see about what the poles look like and what it most likely would result in being.
Okay. Well, sorry, was there something else?
We'll be back with that information and we'll update you again.
Okay. Is everybody satisfied with that position, or does anybody have any other questions at this point? Okay, well, this is a work session. There's no voting decisions that are made in a work session, so I will take a motion to adjourn this portion of our meeting tonight.
Move to adjourn.
It's been moved by Councilor Varwig and seconded by Councilor Bangs. All those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
We'll see you. Thank you, Dan, for attending tonight, and we'll see you all at 7:30. It's the same link, correct?
Yes, correct.
We'll see you at 7:30.
Thank you.